Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis lived there. Confederate officials worked there. Military decisions moved through its offices and homes. Union prisoners were held there. The city was crowded with rumors, fear, politics, and surveillance. Elizabeth Van Lew lived in Richmond, and she supported the Union. That fact alone put her in danger. She came from a wealthy Southern family, but she opposed slavery and remained loyal to the United States. In a city built around the Confederate government that made her an enemy in the eyes of many neighbors. Her intelligence work began with prison visits. Union prisoners in Richmond needed food, clothing, medicine, and help. Elizabeth visited them under the cover of charity. A guard watching her enter might see a wealthy woman doing Christian relief work. Inside those visits, information could move. A prisoner might whisper a name. Someone might pass along news of conditions inside the prison. A captured officer might know something about Confederate movements or morale. A small message could be hidden, remembered, or carried out through trusted hands. The danger was constant. A guard could search too carefully. A prisoner could be pressured. A neighbor could report suspicion. One mistake could expose everyone connected to her. Over time, Elizabeth helped build what is often called the Richmond Underground, a Union intelligence network inside the Confederate capital. It involved Union sympathizers, clerks, servants, formerly enslaved people, and others with access to information official agents could never reach. She used couriers, codes, hidden messages, and careful social behavior. Later accounts describe her as cultivating an eccentric reputation, sometimes remembered through the nickname Crazy Bet. Historians debate how much of that image was deliberate. What matters is simpler. She survived long enough to keep information moving. Her reports reached Union military leaders. She provided intelligence on Confederate defenses, troop movements, prison conditions, and morale. After the war, Ulysses S. Grant recognized the value of her service. Richmond never truly forgave her. Many in the city saw her as a traitor to her class, her region, and the Confederate cause. Her victory came with isolation. Elizabeth Van Lew changed the scale of the story. Rose gathered information through social access. Bell seized moments in contested territory. Van Lew helped create a machine inside enemy ground. And inside that machine was a woman whose story is harder to prove, easier to distort, and impossible to ignore. Mary Bowser's story has to be told with care. She had been connected to the Van Lew household, had been enslaved by the family, and was later freed. According to later accounts, she became part of Elizabeth Van Lew's intelligence network. Some versions say she worked inside or near the Confederate White House, where Jefferson Davis lived and conducted government business. If that access was real, it would place her near the center of Confederate power. Imagine a room in Richmond. Officials come and go. Papers sit on desks. Military correspondence is handled. Men speak in the confident tone of people who believe everyone important is already accounted for. Nearby is a black woman they have been trained by their society to dismiss. That dismissal may have been her cover. The evidence around Mary Bowser is limited. Some records were destroyed. Some accounts appeared later. Historians continue to debate exactly where she worked, what she saw, and how much information she passed. Irresponsible telling cannot pretend the entire legend is settled fact. But the uncertainty should not swallow the larger reality. Black intelligence networks were vital to the Union war effort. Enslaved and formerly enslaved people knew the geography of the South in ways many Union officers did not. They knew roads, river crossings, plantation layouts, food stores, local defenses, and Confederate movements. They knew which men had gone to war and which families were hiding supplies. They heard conversations that white Confederates assumed were safe because they underestimated the people listening. A society built on slavery depended on black labor while denying black intelligence, agency, and political will. During the war, that denial became a strategic weakness. Mary Bowser represents that hidden world. Her story also shows why some spies become famous while others nearly disappear. Secrecy protected people during the war. After the war, racism shaped whose memories were preserved, whose testimony mattered, and whose courage entered public history. Whether every dramatic detail of Bowser's legend can be proven or not, the world she points us toward is real. And once we see that world, the story has to widen. Civil War intelligence was not only passing messages from one officer to another. In some hands, information became a path out of bondage. No one understood that better than Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman already knew the work of secrecy before the Civil War began. She had escaped slavery, then returned again and again to guide others to freedom through the Underground Railroad. She understood fear, movement, trust, timing, silence, and terrain. Those skills were not theoretical. They had kept people alive. During the Civil War, Tubman worked with the Union Army as a nurse, scout, and intelligence gatherer. In South Carolina and nearby areas, she gathered information from enslaved communities about rivers, roads, Confederate positions, supply routes, and local geography. This was knowledge no official map could fully replace. Union officers often lacked deep familiarity with the land. Enslaved people knew it because they lived and worked there. They knew the waterways, the plantations, the paths, the hiding places, the dangers, and the families waiting for a chance to escape. Tubman knew how to turn that knowledge into action. Her most famous wartime role was connected to the Combahee River Raid in June 1863. The operation was formally commanded by Colonel James Montgomery, but Tubman's intelligence, planning support, and guidance were crucial. Imagine Union boats moving through the dark waterways of South Carolina. The river is dangerous. Confederate forces are nearby. Along the banks are plantations where enslaved families know that something is happening, but timing will decide whether they can reach freedom. Tubman's knowledge helped guide the operation. Union forces moved up the Combahee River, destroyed Confederate supplies, struck plantations, and freed more than 700 enslaved people. Many of the freed men later joined the Union Army. This made Tubman's intelligence work different in consequence and moral force. Information in her hands did more than help an army maneuver. It helped break open the system the Confederacy was fighting to preserve. By this stage of the war, the hidden conflict had moved far beyond parlor gossip. It ran through prison networks, black communities, river routes, and military operations tied directly to emancipation. But there was another path into enemy confidence. Some spies did not rely mainly on geography or networks. They relied on performance. Pauline Cushman knew how to read a room. She was an actress, and acting gave her a set of skills that mattered in espionage. control of expression, timing, voice, posture, and fear. On stage, those skills entertained an audience. In wartime, they could keep a spy alive. Cushman worked for the Union. Like Belle Boyd, she became famous, and some details of her story were shaped by publicity after the fact. But her basic role as a Union spy is real. One widely repeated story says that while performing in Kentucky, Confederate sympathizers encouraged her to toast Jefferson Davis. Rather than ruining her, the incident helped her appear sympathetic to the Confederate cause. Union authorities reportedly saw an opportunity and encouraged her to gather intelligence. The exact details are less important than the method. Cushman could become what people expected to see. She could let Confederate supporters believe she was friendly. She could listen without seeming too interested. She could carry herself with enough confidence to survive rooms full of suspicion. Picture the pressure. A group of men test her loyalty with jokes, questions, and casual remarks. Someone watches her face as a Confederate name is mentioned. Someone waits to see whether she hesitates. She has to answer naturally, not perfectly. Perfect can look rehearsed. Natural is safer. That is the kind of danger performance can hide. Cushman was eventually captured by Confederate forces. Popular accounts say she was sentenced to hang as a spy, but Union advances prevented the execution. Afterward, she became a celebrated figure in the North, touring and telling her story. Her life shows another side of Civil War spycraft. The tools were not always codes, maps, or secret compartments. Sometimes the tool was the ability to become believable. By now, the pattern is clear. Each woman entered the hidden war through a different door. Society, audacity, networks, invisibility, local knowledge, performance. The next question is practical. Once a secret was found, how did it travel? Washington parlors, Virginia towns, Richmond prisons, Confederate offices, South Carolina waterways, theater stages, roads watched by soldiers, rooms where men believed their conversations were safe. The hidden war passed through all of them. Some of these women became famous. Some became hated. Some built their own legends. Some were nearly erased. Some fought for the Confederacy. Others risked everything for the Union and for freedom. Their stories are complicated because the war was complicated. But the pattern is unmistakable. Again and again, people in power misjudged who was listening. An officer spoke too freely. A guard waved a visitor through. A household worker remained in the room. A prisoner passed a message. A community shared knowledge of roads and rivers. A woman remembered what no one had written down. Those small moments could travel outward until they touched armies. They could shape a march, expose a weakness, open a prison channel, guide a raid, or help hundreds of people reach freedom. So, who was the most dangerous woman spy of the Civil War? Maybe the answer depends on what kind of power we are willing to recognize. The power of access, the power of nerve, the power of networks, the power of being underestimated, the power of knowing the land, the power of memory. The men of the Civil War often looked for danger in the obvious places. Enemy soldiers, cavalry patrols, scouts crossing lines at night. They did not always look at the woman pouring tea, or the visitor entering a prison. Or the black woman moving through a room where officials thought nothing important could be heard. Or the guide who knew the river better than any map. That is how secrets moved. That is how armies were fooled. And that is why the hidden war was hidden for so long. Not because no one fought it, but because too many people refused to see who was fighting. If you want more hidden stories from the Civil War, subscribe for more forgotten history. And tell me in the comments, who do you think was the most dangerous woman spy of the Civil War? Rose Greenhow, Belle Boyd, Elizabeth Van Lew, Mary Bowser, Harriet Tubman, or Pauline Cushman? Because the answer says a lot about what kind of power history remembers and what kind it almost forgets.